When I was about 15 years old, me and some friends of mine decided to go camping at a nearby lake. It was a 3 to 4 hour hike, and the nearest house was maybe 3 hours away. We brought some homemade wine and drank the whole night. And also ate some poorly grilled hot dogs. Life was good. We all shared a tent, so it was very crowded, but we all fell asleep around 2 a.m. At 4, I wake up because I can feel someone running their hand down my forearm. Not that unlikely that someone brushes up against me, since there really wasn't any space to move around inside that crowded tent. But this is the arm that's facing the tent, so someone touched me from outside of the tent. I sit up and get instantly horrified as I see that all my friends are sound asleep inside the tent with me. I put on my deepest voice and shout out, "Whoever the fuck you are, you need to leave." A manly low voice answers me,
"You should pack up your stuff and leave."
Not threatening or aggressive, just calmly and in a dead kind of way. By now, all my friends are wide awake and just looking at me. No words, just pure horror in their eyes. I say back, "Okay, we will go, but you need to leave."
"Hurry up."
When we get out of the tent, this man, who is huge by the way, has taken the little rowboat that was lying at the bank, gotten into it, and is just sitting in the middle of the lake, watching us pack up our stuff and trying to get away ASAP. We had to walk around the lake to get back, and all the while he was just sitting there, watching us. We never went back there. This was 17 years ago in a rural Scandinavian country. We have a free to roam law, so we were not trespassing. We knew our way around the small town that we grew up in. Everybody knows everybody. There have been no people missing or found dead. Never. There hasn't been a murder in generations. We told our parents at first, who tried to calm us down. They said that we were probably overreacting. But the way he caressed my arm before he told us to go was not normal. When we told him everything, what he said to us, we were told never to go back. After COVID, we all met up again, and the subject came up. We tried to do some digging. There are no houses or cabins nearby where we were. The lake is way too small to fish in, and he was just sitting dead center with his little boat. There's maybe 60 feet to land on all sides. None of us has seen this man before or after ever again. I was backpacking with my dog and about 12 miles from the road and trailhead. So pretty far from people, though popular enough that other hikers might be around. Though we saw no one all day. About 2 a.m., my dog started barking this really low, deep growl and woke me up. I turned on my headlamp and see his teeth showing. He's right on top of me. I hear heavy footsteps. Maybe it's a black bear or a moose that's near the tent. I leash my dog so he doesn't tear through the tent, and the footsteps move further away, but keep circling the tent. All of my food and toiletries are hung in a tree, in a bear bag, nothing in the tent to draw a bear's attention. I clap my hands. Something is still slowly circling. Not something a moose would do, and a bear might if he wanted food. But I've got nothing and a really big dog with me. I decide to step out of the tent with a leash in one hand and bear spray in the other, yelling, "Hey bear!" The footsteps stop. My dog's nose is in the air telling me to look right, but nothing in my headlamp that I can see. I didn't hear anything run off either, and it's quiet. I give it 5 minutes or so, get back into my tent, and it starts up again, circling maybe 50 feet away from me. Maybe an hour later, I hear the footsteps wander off into the woods. At dawn, I take my dog and the bear spray and start looking for the tracks. I find a clear path in the leaves that had been trampled, but no tracks. My dog's nose is on the ground, and I follow his lead. He follows the loop around our campsite. What we finally see is a few human footprints. Not shoe tracks, footprints. A regular size, bare human foot. plus a human turd and toilet paper. Some a-hole was wandering around in the middle of the night near our tent and circling it for an hour or more, then left a dump for me to find. I've been doing this for decades, and this is the only weird experience that I've ever had. The hiking community is incredibly friendly. The trails have become more crowded since COVID, and you're definitely seeing more people on the trails and less trail courtesy, like litter and leaving dog poop bags, pooping too close to the trail, or not burying it. Also, I was very far away from civilization. Bad guys don't hike 12 miles to do harm, and I'm pretty sure they don't carry toilet paper. The only incident that I know of was an emotionally disturbed person stabbed 2 hikers in the Adirondack shelter somewhere in the southern part of the Appalachian Trail maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I've hiked thousands of miles without a single dangerous human interaction. I also don't hike with a gun. They're too much weight to add for me on long multi-day hikes. I'm hiking in the Northeast. The biggest predator to fear are black bear, coyotes, and bobcats. All of those are afraid of humans, especially this far from civilization. If I were in a mountain lion, grizzly, or wolf territory, I would carry a gun. Moose are scary and huge and are not afraid of anything, especially in the full rut period when testosterone kicks in. You need a really big caliber gun to stop a moose from charging, and that's a heavy gun. I've crossed paths with moose 3 times, and they're so big, you can usually hear them crashing around long before you can see them. I've never had an actual stare down. My plan has always been that bear spray would disorient them enough for me to find someplace safe. The biggest predator are humans. What do I actually think happened? As much as I'd love to say it was a young Sasquatch, a skinwalker, or a Wendigo, I'm guessing it was some disoriented backpacker that left their tent to crap and got confused. I was hiking on a somewhat popular long loop trail, and I believe someone was probably hiking the opposite way, then stopped on the trail ahead of me. I was backwoods camping, not at a campground, and regulations are that you need to be 200 feet off the trail and into the woods to set up a camp. So they could have been a quarter mile ahead of the trail, and I wouldn't have known unless they were noisy. The most likely explanation is that they were heavily under the influence, got up to go crap, and got lost on their way back to the tent, and somehow found my sight. They approached my tent and realized they were wrong, then tried to find their way back to their camp. Then they heard my dog, and me yelling to scare off a bear, and either thought they were a risk to them or too lit to answer back. The circle around my camp was several hundred feet, and my tent wouldn't be visible for most of the loop. I was camping between several spruce trees. I never got back to sleep. It was late September and the sunrise was around 6 a.m. When I found the poop pile, I relaxed. I really didn't think there would be anyone nearby, as we were in a very tough area to get to, requiring going over 2 mountain summits from my direction and 6 other mountains in the other direction. The total hike was about 40 miles. We were going to be out for 3 nights and 4 days. After I realized it was a human, my first assumption was that there was a lost hiker. I texted a friend that does search and rescue in the area to see if there were any reports of lost or overdue hikers. If there had been, I would have had my dog try to follow that trail to see if I could find their campsite. As no one was missing, we broke our camp and went our own way. My husband, kid, and myself live out in the middle of nowhere on a plot of land that's about 100 acres. I'd say about 95 of those acres are wilderness, with ATV and hiking trails that we and several other previous owners created by just exploring. We use that land for camping, hiking, and hunting. We like to find a spot, clear it a bit, and camp overnight. There's so much space that we've never stayed in the same place twice. We've seen some kill sites, both old and fresh, lots of animal tracks, places where deer bed down, etc. I've even spent a lot of time hiking solo while the kid is in school and husband's at work. Whether alone or with the family, we always carry a firearm for protection. A few weeks ago, we decided to load up our camping gear and start a new trail. We marked the trails we make with spray paint on trees. We were pretty far into the woods, having hiked almost an hour, when the atmosphere seemed to change. And I don't know who noticed it first, but my husband, who was leading the 3 of us, turned around and gave me a concerned look. The birds had stopped chirping. The insects went quiet. There was no sound all around us. When in the woods, complete quietness is rarely a good thing. We continued onward, hyper aware of our surroundings while our kid continued to merrily talk. We came to a stream that marks the midway point in our property. We stopped for a few minutes, and my husband and I stared down one another. We both felt like something was off, but didn't want to scare our daughter. I finally broke the silence and said, I suddenly didn't feel good and that we should go home. My husband nodded in agreement, while our daughter voiced her protest. Too bad, kiddo. We turned around and started back. After going a few hundred yards, still quiet, silent wilderness, I looked to my right and saw a person crouched down in a ghillie suit about 150 feet off of our trail. I'm positive they saw that I noticed them, but they never moved. I cleared my throat to get my husband's attention, and when he looked back, I put my hand on the gun in the holster on my hip, which caused him to readjust his rifle in preparation of anything. I sped up my family and we hurried home. I told my husband as soon as we were inside. We decided to call the police and report the trespasser. Filed a report and was told to call again if we saw anyone. A few days later, my husband and I went out alone and set up a bunch of deer cams. We didn't go back into the woods for maybe a week or so. Then he and I ventured out to retrieve the cam footage. Of the 9 cams that we placed, we caught the person in a ghillie suit in 2 images. We handed over copies to the cops to go with our report. We haven't gone back out since, except to check out the deer cams. Haven't gotten any other trespassers. It freaks me out even more to think of the few times while camping that we heard walking near our tent in the middle of the night. We always assumed it was just curious animals, but now, I'm not so sure. I live close to the Angeles National Forest. There are some trails within walking distance from my home that take you up into those mountains. It was a very foggy evening, and having just received some bad news over the phone, I wanted to clear my mind with a night hike. I set off around 8 p.m., sad boy music in my ears, and a camelback with water and supplies. I didn't plan to be out that long, but I was definitely going to be out for a while. The hike started off great, and the fog was almost sort of a novelty, very eerie and calm in a neat sort of way. The only sounds coming from water dripping off the plants alongside the mountain. Nobody around, and it felt like I had the mountains to myself. I was hiking without using my flashlight, as it was like driving. High beams of light cut my visibility from about 20 feet to 10 foot. Shining the light would be facing a wall of whiteness and would kill my night vision. After about an hour, things started getting weird. I was maybe 2.5 miles up the trail, and the only light came from the glow of the city behind me. It was getting darker the further I got up into the mountains. I started smelling something. Smells synthetic. First, it was perfume for a few seconds, just a whiff. I couldn't see more than 15 feet or so in front of me at that point, so I was kind of like, huh? That's odd. The second smell was that of a campfire, which was also odd, as there wasn't any campgrounds nearby. I shrugged it off and kept going. I then got a whiff of a plant that brought me back to my childhood, as it reminded me of smelling it during summers when I would play outside with my friends. I wasn't too put off, but indeed it was a bit strange. A bit later, I noticed a dull flash out of the corner of my eye. It was a light coming from a flashlight, but it was above me on the ridge, maybe 50 to 100 feet up. Looked like a glow in the clouds, sort of, like how an airplane looks, flying through. It would get brighter, then dimmer, based on direction. To my knowledge, though, there wasn't any trails there. Again, super weird. I took my earbuds out and listened. Still silence except for the light. The light would turn on, sweep, turn off, then turn on and shine in a different direction. Like someone was looking for something. I just assumed they were having the same visibility problems that I was. I stopped completely, watched as the light would continue to turn on and move, slowly along that ridge. I kept my earbuds out now, and I was just telling myself it was another hiker. I waited for it to pass above me and just kept on. After maybe 10 minutes, I heard whistling, sort of like someone calling a dog, but from a distance. I looked back, and while I was unable to orient myself due to the fog, the whistling was coming from the light that I could now see was across the canyon that I'd been walking along. In terms of distance, it was probably 1/6 of a mile, just a faint glow through the fog. I watched it for a minute, then kept moving. After maybe an hour and a half, I stopped for some water. The trail had turned from dirt to this sandy, crunchy soil. It had only gotten darker, and I was now 3,200 feet in elevation, so the city lights were not as bright anymore. I noted that my footsteps were the loudest thing out here, which was a bit unsettling. The trail twists and turns along the mountainsides, and there would be these scenic viewpoints at turns that would give you maybe 50 feet or so to go off the trail and look over the edge into the valley. I was about 4.5 miles out at this time, so I went out to the edge of the closest view to assess if I wanted to keep going or not. I felt great, energy and fatigue wise, and although my cell service had been spotty, I was trying to look at satellite maps to see what was ahead of me and maybe pick a turnaround point. I was also getting texts now that I hadn't been able to deliver since my service was in and out, so I wanted to check those too. I'm at the edge of the view, and someone had made a little rock sculpture thing with a weird stick. I took a picture of it. I was just chilling out there for maybe 2 minutes or so and looking back at that sculpture. I couldn't see the trail because of the fog and the darkness, but I knew where I was based on direction. And here's where my story gets absolutely terrifying. I pull out my phone to check my texts one last time before setting back off, and as soon as I look down at my phone, I hear 5 very fast footsteps from the direction of the trail. That was the same sound that my feet made because of the soil. I recognized it immediately. I instantly looked in that direction and they stopped. Completely. Silence. I scrambled to get my flashlight and knife out of my bag versus using my phone light and fists and shined in that direction. A wall of fog and silence. The footsteps were not a gallop or the skittering of an animal. It was the footsteps of someone running at me on 2 legs that stopped on a dime. I could feel the terror rising up in my chest as I stood there frozen. I was alone in the dark, up in the mountains, and something was up here with me. I'm getting goosebumps just typing this. Stood there for maybe 2 minutes with the light facing that direction. The biggest problem was that they came from the direction of the trail that I needed to go back. I thought, screw this, I'm heading back. I slowly approached the trail and walked through where that sound came from and began to head back down. For maybe the next 20 minutes, every 2 minutes or so, I would quickly stop and shine the light behind me. And I could have sworn maybe 2 or 3 times I heard an extra step in the distance behind me. Like something was matching my footfalls to remain undetected. I was fast walking now, as the visibility was still too poor to run, and I was worried I'd twist an ankle or something. I kept my light on the whole time, and had my knife out in the other hand. After maybe 30 minutes or so, I heard something crash through the bush on my right, which was the steep side of the canyon. Again, I cannot see anything because of that fog. I moved on the other side of the trail and just kept going. Let me tell you, that was the most determined I've ever been to make it down a trail. I heard other weird sounds along the way, but I ignored them and just kept moving. I will never forget that night. I night hiked one more time on the same trail, but it was a clear night out. I had a headlamp on the whole time and a much bigger knife on my side. I also ran back down when I reached my turnaround point. I'm sorry this was so long, but one paragraph wouldn't do the experience justice. Any questions, just let me know. I've shared this before, but here it is again. My memory is a bit creative, but this is my recollection. Some 15 years ago, I was hiking in the Himalayas. We were a group of 30-something, if I remember right. We would trek the whole day, and at sundown we would camp. Repeat the same day, gradually gaining altitude. The camps were all at designated sites. As we got to the higher camps, were fenced and manned by the army too. So somewhere on the 5th day, I got a bad stomach. In the middle of the night, I had to answer nature's call, so I asked my buddy to join me, and we walked to the watchtower where the army personnel was deep asleep with a thick blanket. He didn't wake up, so we didn't bother and decided to jump the gate. The gate was just chained, not locked. We unchained it and went out. We could see the Milky Way from there. I answered nature's call next to a glacier that had come sliding down the mountains, clearing the forest on its way. It was a moment to live for. The pristine air, water, and such galaxy-studded sky. I still think of those views. Anyway, we were taking in the stars. I finished my business and we start walking back to our tent, still mesmerized by the sky. Just then, we hear the whistle blow. The night watch is awake again. We were strictly told before that after lights out, no one gets out of their tent or any activity. So we kind of start panicking and not wanting to explain ourselves. We just get inside our tent and go to bed. We heard someone walk around our tent and we just lie there, silent, and try to go back to sleep. The next morning there's a big commotion. Some high-ranking army personnel is on the campsite. He's shouting and everybody assembled and is just listening to his bashing. The night guard got a sounding. Apparently, someone stepped out and left the camp gates open. A bear walked into the site but didn't do any damages. The foot marking around our tent and the whole camp sent chills to both me and my buddy. We were scared and didn't own up to our fiasco. To this day, only the two of us know how close of a call we had. I have a big respect for the wild now. Though this doesn't account to anything like a real-life encounter, we were totally clueless. It was a bear that was just across our canvas, and we'd assumed that it was the guard.